Hi, and welcome everyone to wholesoulschool and Foundation's Fireside Chats for April 2020. My name is Marie Mohler, and I'm an author, intuitive, and co-founder of wholesoulschool and Foundation. I am here with my co-host and co-founder, Lacy Frazer, who is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life coach and consciousness educator today. We want to welcome everyone back to our inspiring Fireside Chats podcasts for wholesoulschool and Foundation. I want to first remind our listeners that our mission here at wholesoulschool and Foundation is to educate, enrich, empower, integrate, and liberate the heart and soul in people worldwide. We offer engaging podcasts and weekly inspirational messages on social media platforms, and we support other projects and philanthropic organizations and missions that educate and empower people whose lives have been impacted by incarceration and the criminal justice systems in the U.S. and in the world. We hold a core belief that the conversation and the connections we share here is the education. So I want to welcome Lacy to the conversation today. Welcome, Lacy.
Hi, Marie.
Yeah, I'm excited. We have a lot to talk about today, and I really want to focus in that many in the world are experiencing change, fear, uncertainty, and challenges at this time of profound change, and all due to this global pandemic, right? And we want to continue our conversation here in this podcast and focus that we've had the last few months, I think, Lacy, about growing and emerging and learning and transforming in the challenges and these challenging times of our lives. So the theme of metamorphosis is one that I think we can all relate to, where the caterpillar has to trust with full faith what it is becoming before it understands what that is. There is an inner guidance system guiding what it can't see or even know yet. And that is part of the conversation I think we wanted to focus on today in this Fireside Chats. And we have a number of quotes today, right, Lacy, we're going to be talking about to guide this discussion about these times, our experiences in the world of change, right, on a personal level and on a global level, and the transformation that it's offering itself to us in these times, right? And maybe, Lacy, the last thing I wanted to say before I give you an opportunity to share is just that change is something that's pretty inevitable in our lives. Over the course of a lifetime, human beings and all beings on the planet experience all kinds of change. Habitats change, climate changes, our jobs change, our families change and rearrange themselves. So many things change in our lives, but transformation is a little different the way I view it, at least, because transformation is really at a deeper level a choice. So we all experience change, but we don't all necessarily choose to transform. And I think as we focus in this conversation on metamorphosis, that draws in that invitation and opportunity for change if we maybe are willing to look at our lives and the current circumstances and the events happening through a different set of lenses.
Yeah, Marie, I don't think there could ever be a greater time to engage the transformation process. We at wholesoulschool and Foundation, as some of our followers know, we spent a lot of time talking about change and transformation over the last, year and a half, almost 2 years now. And it's interesting because it hasn't been until sort of this moment in time when we're in the middle of a global pandemic that I've never felt it more important to talk about the true nature of personal transformation. And I think the concept of the metamorphosis, and of course using the butterfly to the caterpillar to a butterfly change process, couldn't be more apropos than right now. Really? I just look at all of us. We are all in our own forced chrysalises right now. Yeah. And I just think it would be amazing. And I feel like in a way we are calling ourselves, you and I feel called to have these conversations to help people recognize the potential and the possibility of this potent time.
And to really grow. Exactly. And if there was ever a time in your life to want to, choose a moment to embrace the opportunity for transformation, this is one of those moments. And for anybody that's listening, even, whether they've been in the journey of personal transformation for a while, right? Or in the ascension process, that some of my listeners that follow some of my work might use that language, or any kind of personal growth and evolution, we can all deepen the experience of our own transformation, right? And for somebody who might be listening to this podcast and they're just beginning that journey, it's perfect because the chrysalis is ready, right? It awaits.
Yeah.
It's right here. And, it's all these circumstances in our lives right now are calling us to see differently, move differently, engage our lives differently, at the very least to review how we were living our lives. Right?
And it reminds me so much in some ways of, as many people know, I worked with men in prison for many, many years. And what I found was that they were in their own chrysalis at that time. One that was, yes, in some ways forced upon them, but they had the opportunity. They were a captive audience, and they had the opportunity to go within and gain self-awareness and promote personal transformation if they so choose, which is what you were saying in the beginning, that it's a choice. And we all have a choice now in as we shelter in place, as we shelter in our own chrysalis, to decide what we are going to do with this time within ourselves. It's an alchemy of sorts. There's a potential for alchemy to happen within us as we choose change. So, at Whole Soul School and Foundation this last month, we've done a lot of Facebook posts that are very inspiring and that speak to metamorphosis and transformation. And I thought it would be great to be able to use some of these quotes to help guide the conversation.
Right. We don't often take the opportunity to share and elaborate on some of the essences and the wisdom in some of those quotes. And this seems to be a perfect month to do that.
I think so, because whether we realized it or not, you do, because you do a lot of that, the Facebook posts, and you're so brilliant at it. And I think you do a great job of weaving just a lot of the wisdom with our theme for the month. And so I wanted to open with a post actually that was not a Whole Soul School and Foundation post, but it was something that I posted. And it is a quote from Brené Brown, who I really is just an incredible person and woman and author and wisdom keeper of sorts. But she says, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And I found that very profound, because when I get into any kind of dialogue with anybody around the situation our world has found itself in right now, I find myself actually feeling such gratitude for what these times are showing us was already broken.
Right.
And that we were not paying attention to. And we're such creatures of habit. We walk through life in kind of such a rote sort of way.
We like well-worn paths.
Oh, that's good.
We really do. We're creatures of habit, which is another, expression of the same energy. But we really do like those well-worn paths. They feel safe to us, even if they're not what's best for us. We choose safety sometimes, often over what is best for us or what's the next growth step for us. We like being comfortable, right?
Well, and what's interesting is she says in her quote that we normalize
right.
greed and inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction.
We got comfortable with all of those things.
Right.
And that's the garment we've been wearing
right.
pre-pandemic. And we haven't really looked at that probably as individuals and as a group culture, really. But as we shelter in place, these times are an opportunity. And she even said the word opportunity. I think many people with this lens of an awareness about growth and transformation and evolution and personal expansion, right? That there is this awareness that there's opportunities to grow in many situations. And this is just one of them. So this is not to discount that some people might have fear or confusion or a loved one who's been impacted by the virus. And
Absolutely.
it's, obviously the closer the virus has come into your experience, the more alert and acute it all feels to you. And still, I would say, no matter how any of us have been impacted by this experience, in whatever way that virus has come into our lives in some way, I think it's still an opportunity. I mean, I've been through my own experiences of some serious heat from some pretty significant trauma. And at the time, I was being guided to embrace the opportunity to change. And so I'm not speaking from a place that I'm that it's an empty statement. It's
right.
Actually, I'm speaking to our listeners from a place of knowing what it requires of us when we are being squeezed, when we are in terror, when we are having some experience of trauma or worry or stress or fear or overwhelm about the other side effects of the pandemic, the financial challenges and the other ripple effects that it's creating in our lives. So I think there's still an invitation to the opportunity to transform and to review some things in your life that maybe you've always known you wanted to change, but now might be the time to review what those things are and what might be the first step, right, to creating that kind of change you actually desire. And if you don't know any kind of change and you're in that well-worn path, it still might be a good opportunity for any of us and any of our listeners to look at that well-worn path. Is it really a fabulous path? Are there some aspects of the path that we'd like to keep, but maybe periodically over the next few weeks, days, months, we actually might want to try some new paths off that well-worn path, right? New activities, new connections, new creative projects.
Can I interject for 1 sec, Marie? Because I even think before somebody can even contemplate a well-worn path versus a new path, they have to first make the decision to turn away from some of that fear and some of that panic and the anger.
Or they have to admit it, at least.
They have to admit it. They have to admit the fear and the anger and the panic and all of those sort of negative emotions that come up that a crisis like this absolutely kind of brings to the surface. And once they are aware of it, and they can say, they have to sort of it could just be pressing the pause button on those emotions to say, is there another way to look at this? Is there another way to feel about this? And I think then they can turn and consider thinking about and contemplating the things that maybe they're not having, but in a way of appreciating what they do have. If that makes sense.
I think so. I mean, I definitely agree. This is a multi-layered process. And for some people who've been in the hero's journey, we might even say this is a multi-dimensional process. But at the very least, we can call it a multi-layered process. And so there's many layers that are going to come up for each of us where we haven't yet done the work, right? And so if just being willing to turn and see your fear is the work for you, if you can't even get to the place where you'd be willing to look at the well-worn path because so much fear is coming up in you, then that's the first layer you need to meet in that hero's journey, in that journey of personal transformation. It's not going to look the same for all of us because the triggers are going to be as unique as our fingerprint. Right? Our triggers have a fingerprint, if you will.
Yes.
And they're each going to require our attention differently and our skills differently. And the word when you were talking, Lacy, that I kept hearing when you were speaking about that is courage. And courage, often people say, it's having the courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's the willingness to feel the fear and do it anyway. Step into the process that's making you fearful or that's summoning your fears to come to the surface. And so when I say it's multi-layered, there's many strengths we need to call on from deep inside ourselves in times like these. But there may not be another pandemic, a global pandemic. We'd all like to intend right now, right here in this moment, that us as a human collective, that we don't need this experience anymore to evolve as a humanity. But I'd say I don't necessarily think that we're going to be a species that is without challenge, because sometimes challenges are the invitation to growth. And challenges can look really terrifying, and challenges can be positive challenges, that it's something we push. Athletes do it all the time. They set up these challenges so that they can grow and get better and improve and learn more and strengthen. So as we engage this multi-layered journey, the hero's journey that's happening for all of us at all these different levels with all these different triggers, we're going to be calling to us, like I keep using this metaphor of Excalibur and, King Arthur, right? And having to summon the sword and access that tool that was his to access. I think we're going to have to summon our tools. And someone on this call might say, well, I have no trouble with courage, right? But then there's layers to courage, right? You might not be afraid of water, but maybe you don't want to jump out of an airplane, and you'd see where your courage is in these different circumstances.
Right.
So this is stretching our courage. This pandemic is stretching us on many levels, I think, actually. And so it's kind of like a multi-headed dragon for many of us. And we might have courage for one of those dragon heads, but maybe not for some of the others. And every single invitation that triggers us in some way and makes us uncomfortable, I would say, if we shift our lens, is an opportunity if we can turn towards it and find the skills we need to meet that and name it and sort of claim that in that moment, witness it of what the trigger is, so that you can have a conversation with yourself about that. Many people have been so distracted in their lives pre-pandemic and, haven't made the time, because we, in our habits and our well-worn pathways, right, make sure that we don't have much time to look at the things that make us fearful and make us uncomfortable. But here we are sheltering in place with a lot more time with ourselves. And so maybe that's the time, maybe that's the invitation, and the opportunity is there. So I really appreciate that quote from Brene Brown.
Yeah, and as you were talking, and I think there's, on the one hand and on the one way, is to look at what you fear and find your courage, and then maybe it's another layer or another path, is this path of gratitude that I think it is bringing up for all of us so many things that we aren't having right now because of the situation we're in, that we have so much gratitude for. And I just want to bring up, I had a really lovely conversation with one of our teenagers here in the house recently. And he said to me, for my generation, who is so used to social media and phone calls and connecting in all these different ways, but not in person. He said, I've never missed being with my people more than now. And I think my generation is going to have a whole new appreciation for in-person connection.
Right.
And I loved that.
Because it changed the perception and the perspective.
Right.
We are from an era obviously our child's experience. And so we remember times before cell phones and all social media and all the internet. And we remember that value, even just getting letters in the mail. There's very little mail coming. That's changing. And so, and I see, people are reaching out in all these different ways, and even, sending snail mail is something that I've seen myself and some of my family members value again.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just, you're really present in those moments. Because if you're going to put a stamp and actually get an envelope and get it out in the mailbox, and there's going to be time in between, you really want to say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah.
And that's an invitation to a different kind of change and presence, consciousness, really, in your experience and how you're showing up.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I have another quote here that is actually, somebody had shared this with me, a friend of mine, and it's from the Mind's Journal. And it says, "Nobody ever talks about this part. You know, the part where you're no longer a caterpillar and not yet a butterfly. You don't know who you are, and you don't know where you're going. All you know is that every fiber of your being is calling for transformation, for disruption, for a revolution of the spirit. So surrender, break down. This is not the death of you. This is the dying of who you once were. This is your rebirth, darling, and these are called growing pains."
I love that. I have chills.
Yeah, when she sent that to me, I thought, oh, that's so, well, of course she thought of me and of us and the work that we do and shared that. But I think many of us can relate between that point of no longer and not yet, right? We're no longer the caterpillars and we're not yet the butterflies, and we're in that chrysalis time. And it's really that time of uncertainty where we might say to ourselves, in our darker moments or our more stressed moments, that we can't see, right? It's dark in there. We don't know. It's scary. There's fear. But in the same way, if you see it like a womb or a safe space, it's also simultaneously an opportunity for great things to emerge.
There's an excitement that I can feel in that, for sure.
Right?
Yeah, and it's we are in that in between now. Physically, literally, we are in that in between. We are, as Brene sort of intimated in her quote too, we're no longer in the world that we lived in. It's not really the world that we knew. The well-worn paths are growing over as we sit here in our homes, right? But we still can't see yet what the other side is gonna be like. What are the financial markets gonna be like? What are
companies?
Schools?
What companies will make it through?
What companies will make it through? What educational institutions will be still standing, and what will they be doing?
Right.
What will our medical situation be? What will hospitals look like? What will healthcare look like? Will we have national healthcare?
Right. Well, in this way, it is an opportunity. We haven't used this word yet too much here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, but the caterpillar is resetting. It's resetting and reorienting to an entirely new life, and it never returns to be that caterpillar. It doesn't go back, kind of like what Brene Brown was saying.
Right.
It doesn't return to what it once was. It moves on and it flies forward. And I think that's what happens in a reset. If it's a financial reset, if it's a personal reset, if it's a talent and skill reset, or relationship reset, whatever these things are, we are kind of making that shift into that, if we can, to embrace the opportunity for change. I think that's what transformation, ultimately, at least one layer of transformation is when you embrace change and you engage change consciously because you know it's bringing you to a better version of yourself, right? Change is going to happen anyway. But when you're embracing it and you consciously engage with it, you're actually summoning the better parts of yourself and your deeper strengths and your higher gifts to come out and emerge in that process. And so I think that concept of the reset in its best form for all of us could be that maybe the systems of greed and lack and scarcity that Brene Brown is talking about, or in that quote that I had, right, that there's this surrendering and there's this, disruption and this breakdown that's occurring. I think those metaphors could be words used for these times. And yet on the other side, there's jewels, right? There's treasures, there's gifts in all of that. And so again, we're not disregarding that there's some health issues, and there's some trauma that people are going through, and
Well,
that's all part of the human experience. I think that's why they nicely and neatly contain it through time in all of our fables and stories and mythologies as the hero's journey with quotes around it, because it doesn't maybe sound so scary, those 3 words, the hero's journey. But if you really think about you going on that journey, that you are the hero in that journey, why do you think there's always fire-breathing dragons in the journey, or things that are just seem impossible for any human being to transcend or to tackle or to, manifest in some way successfully? And yet it's a journey we all go on. We spent a lot of time talking about that last year, and here we are again. So it's going to call that faith and trust and surrender. And remember all those layers, that multi-layered trigger and that multi-layered process. There's going to be more layers. We're not through the layers yet.
Well, and I also believe that everybody, we can talk to anybody walking down the street, or any family member, or any of our friends on Facebook, and most likely everybody has a story to tell about their own hero's journey at some level, a trauma they've been through, a loss they've sustained, didn't think they were going to get through, but they did, and this is what it looked like on the other side. And yes, you and I talked about that a lot last year. And we've also talked a bit and referred to our own personal sort of trauma that we lived through back from 2004 to 2007. We had I'll call it a chrysalis time, if you will. That was our personal journey. But what's so interesting about this particular time is that it's global. It's global. There isn't a person on the planet. There isn't a person, that's not in a country somewhere that is being impacted by what is happening now. So yes, many of us have been on our own individual, personal transformation journeys, our heroes' journeys, and which have required catalytic changes and recalibration in our own view of the world and our own spiritual nature. But now we're in the middle of something that we are doing on a global scale, and that is just profound to me and exciting, and I think probably I can feel the excitement because I have lived through my own personal layers throughout my lifetime, and I've lived to tell about it. And now we get to share it on this platform.
Well, and we're just growing at another level. We're being called to a different depth of experience, of change and transformation too. It's not, it's like it's a spiral. It's not just a circle. You know what I mean? We have layers inside the spheres that we journey.
Yes.
And so...
yes. Okay. So I'm going to go on and read our third quote. Awakening is not a thing. It is not a goal, not a concept. It is not something to be attained. It is a metamorphosis. If the caterpillar thinks about the butterfly it is to become, saying, quote, "and then I shall have wings and antenna," unquote, there will never be a butterfly. The caterpillar must accept its own disappearance in its transformation. When the marvelous butterfly takes wings, nothing of the caterpillar remains. And that is a quote that we posted by Alejandro Jodorowsky on our Whole Soul School and Foundation post, social media post. And again, it sort of touches on a number of elements that we've already mentioned.
And these quotes don't exist for no reason. This is kind of, again, what Joseph Campbell tracked, that hero's journey in all of our mythology. If you go back, what I find fascinating in the work that I do and when I collect these quotes for Whole Soul School and Foundation's posts, it's in the scientists, it's in the mathematicians, it's in the poets, it's in the artists, it's in the leaders, right? It's in every vocation. There are people who tapped into this universal awareness and consciousness from just about every perspective there is. And so, of course, there would be threads and themes. And I think, remind me, Brene Brown said we've got to stitch a new garment, right? There's
one that fits all of humanity.
One that fits all of humanity. And I would even say there's a fiber, there's a thread that weaves through all of these quotes and through all time. Because humans have been journeying this epic hero's journey for centuries. right? For millennia. And I think
it's why we're here. Like I always go back to that the purpose of our human existence, to me, at least this is the lens through which I look at my own human existence, is I came here to do something. I came here with a purpose. I came here, even if the purpose is only to grow, which ultimately that is the purpose, to grow my soul, to grow my wisdom, to learn. As painful as that is sometimes, that is the purpose of being here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey into self-mastery and soul mastery and discovery. And when we don't have that perspective, that's part, like you and I can say this because we've uncovered this language. We've tapped into the mythologies. We've uncovered people like Joseph Campbell, and we've listened to people like Tesla, and we've tuned into the things that Einstein, the breadcrumbs he was leaving for us. We've tapped into other people who've journeyed the hero's journey, and it's given us strength. And that's another layer for people to consider in this journey. Who in your history books, who in your, in your round table of gurus do you like to turn to for your own inspiration? That's a skill. That's a skill.
Even your own ancestors.
Even your own ancestors, exactly. There's a greater wisdom that's bigger than simply just us as an individual. There's much greater wisdom in the collective. And when you can tap into that collective consciousness, it doesn't eliminate all fear, but we feel less alone. We feel less alone in the journey. And just that can help reduce and release some of the fear. So these are powerful quotes. There's many. I mean, when you look up Metamorphosis, there's just a lot of wisdom through a lot of people through a lot of time, right? And if we can embrace that wisdom, those threads and the fibers and the weaving that all these teachers and wisdom sharers were giving to us, and if we can begin to accept, it's not everybody's lens, but if we can become willing to look through a different lens, that there might be an opportunity, there might be a gem or a jewel in this journey, even if it doesn't look like that right now in your life, in your experience of this event on the planet. And in any challenge in your life, we all have been challenged. We might face some challenges in the future. And, but it is an invitation to see differently, to perceive differently. Then these last two quotes might have a place in your life to inspire you. I have one quote from Deepak Chopra, and he says, "You are the luminous mystery in which the entire universe with its forms and phenomena arises and subsides. When this realization dawns, there is a complete transformation of your personal self into your universal self, the complete loss of all fear, including death. You have become a being who radiates love the same way the sun radiates light. You have finally arrived at the place from which your journey began." And so that's beautiful, and that implies like a wholeness. We come from the light, we return to the light, right? And there really, in many faiths, right, there really is no death. There's just a transformation into another form. And I think that's also mirrored and reflected to us in the hero's journey. And the way, I'm going to keep going back to Joseph Campbell's work because I've appreciated that over the years. And I love the movie Finding Joe, which we talked about in an earlier podcast. But the hero doesn't just go on a hero's journey once. The hero goes on the hero's journey multiple times. And that's not true of the butterfly. It goes through it's a caterpillar, it goes through a chrysalis, it becomes the butterfly, and it returns to source. It returns to light. It returns to the great mystery or creation or whatever you might call that. But I'm always reminded to the hero's journey, there's just these spirals and spheres of experiences, but we grow to new depths. So
so beautiful and so true. So true. Yeah. My wish for humanity would be that the people could really embrace that and trust it.
Yes.
And have faith in it.
And, we'll talk about this, but that there's a lot of work for some people to do to get to a place of appreciation for challenge in our lives. But in that hero's journey, the hero does recover appreciation and gratitude for the challenging times, I would say just about equally as the joyful times and the abundant times and the grace times, right? And so, I love, visiting with people's words and their wisdom through time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and to be able to...
It's a map.
It is. It is. And then to be able to sync up our own inner wisdom from our own experiences with the wisdom of the ancients.
We participate in that stitching a new fabric, stitching a new garment, and we're voices in a garment that's going to inspire people after us. And someday there'll be somebody else on, some other charity or foundation, and they'll be quoting Whole Soul School and Foundation from what we once said, and that's part of that circle of life, but really circle of light, because we are these beings with extraordinary skills and awareness and consciousness and gifts, and we're all in a process of discovering that again. And these quotes just help us to infuse our listeners with a little bit of inspiration and an invitation to see your life differently, to just be willing to look at your world a little differently. And a podcast like this would not, especially one full of just wisdom and amazing quotes, would not be complete if we did not include a quote from our very own mystic poet, Flower Diamond. Exactly. Exactly.
I think we should...
She has much wisdom, and in poems, because these were quotes, but in poems, it's even more multi-layered, right? And you get to search your own soul for what that poem means to you.
Yes.
And I think that's what Flower Diamond offers to all of us every single month in every poem that we post. It's just extraordinary. And I will say again, it is a kind of medicine for the soul. So if you've missed and had the misfortune of missing Flower Diamond's poems and posts that we share on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and even on our website, Flower Diamond has her own blog page. And I'm trying to catch up with some of the older posts, but you can see some of the monthly posts that we've made directly through our website. It's worth a visit because she's inviting you to look differently and from different angles and different perspectives in your journey, in your life, in the experiences you're having.
Yes.
So please.
And this is one that we posted this month on Whole Soul School and Foundation Facebook. Laughing Buddha, teach me your secret that you should smile on such a gray day. I'm scared, but you laugh right through it. You see me fearless, and that is my wish, to be free. So when I read that, it just sort of reverberates throughout my body that the ancient teachers, such as Buddha and the many that we've quoted here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, they know the secret. They know the secret of laughter. They have trust and faith in
no matter what,
the great mystery, in the human design, in all that we've talked about.
Exactly. There's no attachment to the good or bad of an experience. It's just an experience.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's why the Buddha can laugh, because he clearly has had many cycles and spheres and spirals of the hero's journey to get to the point to be the laughing Buddha. You don't get that with one challenge because you don't have perspective yet. You probably need hundreds and thousands of experiences and events and catalysts and relationships and all kinds of things. But we're invited to even find that spark inside ourselves, like that laughing Buddha, to be free.
Yes.
To be free of all that we most fear, right? To be free of the experience of life, right? Because as we embrace the journey consciously and we appreciate the transformation process and the metamorphosis that's available to all of us in all timelines, in all ages and stages of life, right? There is this opportunity to appreciate the grace of the journey and all that it's teaching to us. And that's where the freedom lives, is when you transcend all attachments and all anger and all your fear and all your confusion and worry and overwhelm, right? It's not that if we feel those things, we're bad or unevolved. We're just in another layer of the depth of the hero's journey, of the human to soul journey. We're all in it.
Yes.
We're all in it.
Yeah. Amen. And I
Right?
think, I'd love to round us out by just reminding our listeners that, during this time as we all shelter in place, that it's important to, number one, be aware, pay attention to our negative emotional reactions and experiences that we're having. Know that it's okay. Let those negative emotional experiences sort of pass through us, and then start to really pay attention to what there is to appreciate. What is it that we're not having, and start appreciating it. Start choosing to perceive our reality at this time differently. Start looking for the silver linings. Start intending growth and prosperity and abundance in a very different way as we sit in a period of where we see and hear a lot about lack.
Yeah, and appreciation and the things we're talking about, even the journey of the hero. Have you ever heard about a hero going on the hero's journey, like the epic journeys that heroes take in stories, right, in our mythologies?
Yeah.
Do they sit in a chair and never go anywhere? Right? They actually, most are depicted that they have to literally physically journey somewhere.
Well, they have to answer a call. They have to answer the call to the adventure.
Correct. They have to answer a call to take action and engage the adventure, and then they have to go through some events or some tasks to recover some of these bigger heroic skills, right? And the same is true for all of us in this journey, that or even appreciation requires an inner commitment to take that action. And you don't have to tell anybody necessarily. You don't have to announce to the world that you're appreciating today and you're starting your hero's journey. We don't all need to do that. But if we don't consciously commit to things like appreciation and gratitude and take the action to actually feel it, to go through it, to find something to appreciate, to actively be looking for things to appreciate, that's where the hero's journey starts to come to life versus it being somebody else's story. The hero's journey is for all of us, but it's easy to sit back and go buy the books in the bookstore or online of other people's epic tales and other people's transformation journeys, right? But it's really time for our own. And so even appreciation and gratitude, when you bring these things up, Lacy, the hero goes on that journey when they actively commit and accept the invitation to take action and engage the journey and be a participant in it, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, so if we're talking about action, the last thing I was going to add to that is, what is the one action step? What's the next one thing you could do to either open up your fields of perception, to look at your life differently, to be willing to look at the fear that you have, to maybe get support from, a therapist or a life coach or somebody in your community that has those skills and can support you in this process, to look at things you've tried to avoid or successfully avoided for a great deal of time. Everybody will have a different next right step, right? But there's a next right action step for all of us once we understand the value and the marrow in the journey. So I love that. I love that we're about, sharing these messages through our nonprofit, through these podcasts. We had Kate Fryman Fox this month talking about authentic connections, self-discovery, and finding joy and finding relationships, right? We had Kelly Chapman talk about her own journey of finding the silver linings in holding it all, being aware of the contrast of our lives, where you can hold tragedy and pain and grief, and you can also be in joy at the same time and pursue your gifts and your dreams. And so that was a powerful message in the podcast with you and Kelly.
Yeah.
And here we are talking again always for us, I think it does lead back to the hero's journey, because I think it's what we know very, very well. And I think I've been around that loop a few times, and when it happens again, I move into appreciation. I see there's another opportunity for growth. I take that action step to embrace it, and I step into the journey, and here we go. So there we are. So I invite all of you, our listeners, and anybody who finds this at any point, because a lot of these messages are timeless. Even though this global event is going on, there's always opportunities for growth. And so I want to thank all of our listeners that spend time with us in these podcasts, that share, like, and subscribe to our channel, and that repost on social media. We just appreciate everybody who's helping to share these messages. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing, and continue to send, the links to people who might benefit from a particular podcast that's in your life, that these messages might be meant for in their hero's journey. And we invite you to visit us on our website at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. You can also find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and we want to thank everyone who donates to Whole Soul School and Foundation. There are people who are one-time donors, and there are people who are sustainer donors. And we appreciate each and every donation that everybody gives to our foundation and our mission. And, more and more we envision a time where Whole Soul School and Foundation is going to increasingly support other projects and other products and other philanthropic missions that are truly designed to help set this world free. And obviously, specifically supporting people whose lives have been impacted by incarceration and the criminal justice system, but also supporting people who have felt imprisoned, enslaved, trapped, stuck, blocked, in some way not able to be fully free, like Flower Diamond's poem, reminds us of the laughing Buddha and wanting to feel that level of freedom, or the butterfly, right, that is so colorful and flies into this new experience of life. So we're supporting those projects and products and missions, and we thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lacy, for joining me today.
Thank you, Marie. Delightful as always.
Always. And we will see our visitors and our listeners and our guests and our audience here at Whole Soul School and Foundation next month for some new podcasts and new inspirations and,
new guests.
So thank you, everybody. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you next time.